doesn't need his name up in lights, he just wants to be heard. Whether it's the beat of the mic, he feels so unlike everybody else, alone, in spite of the fact that some people still think that they know him. But fuck him, he knows the code. It's not about the salary, it's all about reality and making some noise, making a story, making sure his click stays up. That means when he puts it down, Todd's picking it up. Let's go.
Hi.
Hey, good morning, Miss Sophia. How are you?
Very well, thank you. And you?
I am well. It's so nice to speak with you again. And for the listeners, if you're not aware of Miss Smallstorm, she is an incredible wealth of knowledge, and we would encourage anyone to look into her and her incredible mind. I really, truly believe she is changing the course of the world. So welcome again, Miss Sophia, and thank you for being here. I would like to know just a few things about you before we get into some more detailed, heavier things. Can you explain to us actually what drives you to do what you're doing?
You know, there's really very little else to do. The world is a commerce platform, and people have been trained to pursue that to enormous lengths. I mean, people come to America because they think it's the only country where you could become a millionaire, and it can happen overnight, only in America. And this gravitation toward material wealth at the expense of everything, and anything and everything else in your life is considered fine. People go wink, wink at millionaires as long, if they've made money fraudulently, it doesn't even matter as long as they have tons of money and live in these big mansions. I mean, when you see on television programs like Secret Lives of the Super Rich, it's horrible. It makes you want to throw up. And so I guess what I'm doing is the opposite of that.
So thank you for what you do. Is it a more drive you feel I feel commanded almost in a way to seek out and seek knowledge. Would you say that's a fair assessment of how you feel?
Yeah, I mean, I think anyone who's alive can do this. Everyone has some kind of impulse to understand what's going on around them, if they have the leisure in which to do that. I mean, there are people who are driven by stress to the point that they can't even relax to think for a minute. But I think we're hardwired to look around us and go, what's that? And how about this? And why did this happen? And that's what kind of person I am. And the older I've gotten and the more, observation I've made of my surroundings, I couldn't help start questioning things. A couple of decades ago, I really wasn't interested in politics as a young adult because it was all confusing and made no sense and seemed to be about wars and elections. But actually, as I started sorting out other parts of my life, I had the time and curiosity to put into a little more of a political exploration, especially when the Iraq War was our Vietnam War, our generations, my generations. So I wanted to look into that. Why? Why is this happening? And that's kind of what got me going. I, of course, had to look into 9/11, and then that led me to chemtrails. And there's a path, Kyle, just as you say.
Well, that is very well said. Maybe we can go into a few points, maybe a few data points about our soil. And are you familiar with George Washington Carver at all? He's known as the Black Leonardo, I'm sure you know. And
of course, but right. I don't know why you're bringing him up. You might have something to say that I don't know about.
Yeah, I learned this from The Secret Life of Plants, which is an excellent book I'm sure that you've read or you at least know about. But he had a professor in one of his, I think he's in the College of Iowa. His professor that left a lasting impression on him told him that all nations endure as long as they're topsoil. So maybe you could elaborate on that a little bit for us and how important that our topsoil is to us.
Well, after the war, all the industries that had sprouted up to support the war effort, the aluminum industry, the DuPont and the huge companies that were using uranium and fluoride, using fluoride to refine uranium, these refineries, the synthetic rubber companies. All this was huge in the wake of World War II. So the enormous amount of baghouse dust, flue dust, factory slag was being dumped in the 50s, in the 40s and 50s. It was just being dumped on empty land because people figured, empty land, who cares? This was the thinking then. And so as we developed more environmental consciousness, the EPA started to get involved, and they started to tell these industries, you can't just dump your waste. You've got to understand this is hazardous waste. It's dangerous. You have to contain it. You have to transport it someplace, and you have to bury it safely. And this was, of course, very, very expensive. So I read a book written by a Seattle Times journalist called Fateful Harvest. An excellent book. Came out right when 9/11 happened, so nobody paid any attention to this book. Anyway, Fateful Harvest by Duff explains that this factory waste was turned, someone had a brainwave, and it was turned from a waste into a product. They didn't do a thing to it. They just decided, since all these very noxious, dangerous elements like lead, arsenic, manganese, titanium, aluminum that are harmful to biology in any kind of concentrated form, these are all earth elements. They're right in the periodic table. They're in the soil. They're in the earth. So they decided to mix this baghouse dust, this factory waste, with fertilizer and sell it to farmers to have them sprinkle it back on the land. And this is what destroyed the biome of our soil. This is called chemical fertilizer. And America was using tons of it. And chemical fertilizer injured the crops, and that drew pests. So then you had a twin industry, the need for chemical pesticides. So between the chemical pesticides and the chemical fertilizers that are being used, and I'll tell you something, organic farmers are allowed to use chemical fertilizer. They're just not allowed to use chemical pesticide. And many organic farmers use chemical fertilizer. Big organic, certified organic companies that are popping up everywhere now, they are probably using chemical fertilizer because it's not chemical pesticide. So what has happened is the bacterial diversity in soil has been greatly diminished. And by transfer of food into our bodies, this is what we do. We eat what grows in the soil. We have a very diminished biome or bacterial spectrum in our bodies, in our gut.
Well, we certainly do, and that's where our energy comes from, correct? That we get the mitochondria in our gut actually conveys energy to us.
Well, the mitochondria are in our cells. The bacteria are in our gut. And your gut is a very vast system that includes, the mucosal passages of your eyes, your esophageal tract. Your gut membrane, gut wall, starts in your head and goes all the way down to your butt. Now, problem is that without enough bacteria in our own gut biome, bacteria produce a carbon metabolite for their energy purposes. Bacteria are not from our life kingdom. We've actually integrated or incorporated another life form into our bodies in the form of bacteria. And we need 20,000, 30,000 different kinds of bacteria living inside us in our gut. Or we aren't producing the right kind of health regulation because this is very complicated and I don't expect anyone to understand it, but the carbon metabolite that bacteria make, each type of bacteria makes a different type of carbon, and those carbon metabolites match the different mitochondrial facets in our enormous range of cells and tissues. So there's an electric language going on. It's called redox signal between the carbons that are produced by the bacteria and the mitochondria in all our different kinds of cells. So we are running at less than 10% of our proper gut biome right now. And that's because the soil biome has become diminished. And we have a lot of chemical assault, our bodies are not okay. They're not conducting health electrically very well. And this health is run by electrical signaling. And the problem is that we don't have enough of the right signals going off inside us, and thus we are observing a tremendous surge of degenerative disease. And you see it in people, in old people. You see how long they live. They're propped up by pharmaceutical drugs, but they can't even walk. They can barely, they're toddling around, walkers, wheelchairs. They've got horrible looking bodies, I'm sorry to say.
Well, there's no light left in them. And I believe you're familiar with Dr. Jerry Tennett's work as well. I've studied him a few years ago, and he talks about every cell in the body is designed to work on negative 20 millivolts of electricity. And so that electricity is darkening just as the people are darkening, it seems.
Right. We need a certain number of electrons to maintain the negative charge that healing and then, maintenance, cellular maintenance and repair requires. And there are two different strengths. For maintenance, cells need a certain kind of charge, electrons, a supply of electrons, and for healing, they need more. And we are not getting that right now. These are all different aspects of the, let's just call it, intracellular, the biological discussion. It's too difficult, Kyle, to try to explain this to a lay audience. And I am a lay person. I barely understand it, and I don't feel qualified to have a real deep, informed discussion without a bunch of notes.
Sure. Can you bring us back to the bacteria in the soil then and explain just how important it is, and then how can we get it back into our bodies?
We can't. It's gone.
Mm-hmm.
So we have farmed the land so aggressively. We have destroyed the topsoil. There isn't any topsoil left to speak of. We have 1.5 feet of topsoil, if we're lucky, anywhere you go. Farms now grow food in less than 2 feet of topsoil.
Sure.
Once upon a time, the earth had 200 feet of topsoil. Do you remember the Great Plains, the Dust Bowl? Well, the farming in the Dust Bowl was the beginning of aggressive mechanical farming. There were what were called tenant farmers. They didn't own the land. They just came and farmed because there was a growth boom in America and they felt that they could cash in on it. And so the way that the land was, plowed, heavy plowing, and fields were not left alone. They were used over and over, and the harshness of the mechanical plowing, the tilling, it really what it did was it shredded the roots of the prairie grass. The prairie grass held the topsoil in place. And the roots being shredded by these giant farming machineries caused the topsoil to dry up, and then when the winds came, it blew away. Hence, the middle of America became known as the Dust Bowl. And people had to leave. They migrated. In fact, I read somewhere that something like 25% of the population of California came from Oklahoma.
Wow.
From the Dust Bowl. So we have to be very careful how we farm. And right now, given the way that we're farming, the modern farming, it's eroding the soil. This is why you need to supplement with iodine on a regular basis, which I have now supplied through my online store. And iodine is so inexpensive. It used to be found in mineralized soil, and we only needed a little bit of it way back when to be healthy. But now we don't get it. It's not in the soil anymore because the soil has been eroded and destroyed, ripped out. The bacteria have been ripped out, and they're all gone, and so are the minerals. We've demineralized our soil and we filled it with chemicals. So we have a problem because we rely on the biome of the soil to be integrated into our bodies and thus to run our own microbiome. Now, here's what people immediately jump to. They say, well, what about probiotics? But I found out not very long ago, to my astonishment, that probiotics are from cows. They're from cows' intestines. They're bacterial forms that are not meant to live in humans. So they don't really do anything for us. But it's something like a $30 billion industry.
And even if they did, they would only work for a month or so anyway, and the body would adapt to them, right?
Well, they introduce a change. They bring in a new variant. And most of these probiotics, they only have a few strains, but then many, many copies of the same bacteria. I actually used probiotics for a while, and I got a form that had 15 or 16 different bacterial strains, but they still don't come from humans, and they're not meant for humans. They're for cows.
Sure.
So this is what I've been trying to get my friends to understand. Don't use probiotics. So the answer, how do we get more bacteria? Well, we cannot get more bacteria into our gut. We don't have any on the earth. Unless you want to go to the heart of Africa or someplace in the rainforest where there hasn't been any modern farming, no presence of modern man ever, you will not get a proper biome going. So what we have to do, what I've learned now, is to rely on, well, I shouldn't say we need to rely, but I have been taking a product called Restore, which I started to sell last year, and I've done very well with it. And Restore is not my invention by any means. Just because I'm talking about it doesn't mean I made it. It's the creation of a doctor. He was a chemotherapy researcher, and he once he realized that the metabolites of carbon in the body are missing. You see, there were some studies that came out from UCLA and UCSD, University of California, San Diego, and Los Angeles, that pointed to incidence of cancer increasing with an absence of certain types of bacteria. So if you were deficient in bacteria X, you tended to get breast cancer. If you were deficient in bacteria Y, you tended to get prostate cancer. And nobody could really understand, nobody in medicine could understand why. They just had these studies in their hands. And it was Dr. Zachary Bush who figured out that it has to do with the metabolites of carbon that those particular variants of bacteria made that connected directly with the mitochondria in the cells of the breast and the cells of the prostate. And mitochondria now, get this, are not human. They are derived from ancient bacteria. They are these little engines that live within our cells. We've got two foreign life forms living in our bodies that are the orchestrators and conductors of our health system. That's pretty amazing. We don't digest our food. Bacteria digest our food. We can't even take the electrons out of the fats and sugars that the bacteria liberate from our food. The mitochondria do that, and they're relatives of bacteria. So our energy production relies on the interfacing of other life forms that live in us. We are hosts to them, but they're called endosymbionts. They are the little guests that do our metabolic energy production.
Well, they really are. And you say we cannot get them back into our bodies.
No, because they don't exist. You go outside and the biome in the soil is limited. You buy organic food and that biome is limited too. Mm-hmm. So where you can make it up is to replace the carbon. Strike that. The carbon that the bacteria have made. So this Dr. Zach Bush went to the desert, the American Southwest desert, and he found that this ancient earth, it's now in the desert. The desert was topsoil at one time, but now it's dried and compressed and basically pristine. This desert earth contains the carbon residues of all those bacterial forms that once lived in that earth when it was topsoil. Mm-hmm. So the bacteria are gone. They're alive, and they have to have a living space, a living environment that supports life. But they left a bunch of carbons. Carbon molecules can last forever. And those carbon molecules are in this product Restore, which is made of desert earth. And so when you take a little bit of Restore every day, you're putting back in your body those very important carbons that talk to the mitochondria in all your different cells. And then your health starts to go on the uptick.
It absolutely does. I've been using it myself for probably 2 years now. It's truly incredible. It really is the amount of energy that I've noticed, and I'm already very high energy anyway. So it is incredible, that's for sure.
Sophia, I'd like to know how long do you feel the last 2 feet or so of soil we have now will last?
Well,
I honestly couldn't say. I mean, I'm not an agricultural chemist.
and this is pre-chemtrail as well. You're talking about the soil being destroyed before chemtrails, before the aerosols in the sky.
Right.
And now we have that to deal with.
There is a real issue with topsoil. You know, Spain, when they created the Armada, Philip I was the king who cut down the forests of Spain to build a Spanish Armada and become an empire. And that destroyed the topsoil. The rains came, topsoil of Spain flowed into the ocean, and Spain became arid. Now they're a country that produces citrus, olives, and that's about it. They cannot grow tons of food as they once used to.
Wow, how interesting. Did not know that. Can you speak to us a little about the chemtrails and that attack that we're being faced with now as well?
Well, of course. I mean, we have a lot of programs going on. Weather modification, geoengineering, solar radiation management. These are all kind of cousins of one another. And people have noticed, and now there's no denying it, starting really after 9/11, there was a lot more going on. The spraying of aerosols, materials in the sky that follow the back of what looks like a jet plane. And we are told they're contrails, but they last a very long time. They fan out, they create a white haze, and normal contrails don't do that. So something else is going on in the sky, and this white haze is acting like a lot of conjecture as to what it's doing, a lot of possibilities. First of all, in terms of chemistry, it does trap ambient moisture. It is composed of very small metallic oxide particulates, and it traps the moisture and holds it. So it can prevent rain, or it can create rain. Because if you study how raindrops are formed, and you know, one of the things that people don't do, Kyle, is they don't have a curiosity. So I grant you this: the average person listening to this show, even though they might be awake and interested, they're not going to go to a science book and figure out how the raindrop formed. They're going to rely on me and you to tell. But I'm saying, develop a curiosity about your world, about certain natural processes, and then compare them to what you're seeing. But we are having artificial weather now because there has been a manipulation and an interference in the material that's above us, the water, the moisture. We have artificial clouds. We have real storms in the sense that they occur, but they're not manufactured by nature.
Mm-hmm. How incredible. What were you going to say?
When did the chemtrails, is there an exact year that we know of when they started, or?
They started doing weather tricks, I'll call them, way back when. They were using silver iodide to seed clouds. I mean, you can really look this up. There's a very good film called Frankenskies by Matt Landman. It's on YouTube, and he covers the early history of weather games, weather warfare, and he uses clips and footage and missions from the military itself. He doesn't make anything up, and the first half of that film is extraordinarily well done. So I would recommend Frankenskies by Matt Landman.
Well, even back with the Cirrus Project, I read off of, I believe, Dane Wigginton's website. He talks about it in the 40s. I believe in 1942 they they were modifying weather. Even John Kennedy spoke about weather control. And some of my friends still will disagree with me. And how can you possibly believe that? And I show them quotes by the president, one of the former presidents. So they just must not want to know.
Well, this is what I said. People they weren't trained to use, they weren't grown up to use their own curiosity. People go to school, they sit down at a hard wooden desk, and they're told to pay attention to what the teacher says. And what the teacher says is in this book here in front of you. And take this book home after school and learn it. And then you'll be tested on it. And so people don't learn out of their own curiosity because they're instructed.
Sure. And then the chemicals and all the fake food and the fluoride is making people very docile and not inquisitive in the first place. So they're not, no one is thinking for themselves, that's for sure.
Well, very few of us are, and very few of us seem to appreciate the sharing of knowledge that is not in those textbooks, because what we're taught at school is understanding. I learned this word from a recent interview I did with a guy called Martin Kenny. Not understanding, and get to a new word, but to understand means to submit. And that's what we have to do at school. We have to sit there and be quiet and understand what we're being told and memorize it and know it and be tested on it. And if you understand it really well, you get an A. If you don't understand it well, you get a D or an F. And you're punished and you're bad and you're stupid. So the pressure is to understand perfectly, to submit perfectly. To understand means to stand under, to give in, to yield to what authorities are telling you. And adult life, same thing. All your contracts, this is where the contracts and commerce come in. Your driver's test, you have to understand what's in the handbook and pass the test and submit to the rule, the road. And all your contracts for insurance, for even your electric company, everything is about signing and understanding the terms. And understand means submit. But if you decide to go inside, you're going to start exploring a world of inner standing. Inner standing means to ask yourself questions and look for the real answers. Inner standing means to follow a different drum than the drum that runs your life of understanding. So I say, if you start inner standing instead of understanding, your whole life is going to change, and you're going to have adventures every day.
Well, it is precisely what that term means. It does mean submit. And it's fitting that you brought that word up, because I was talking with Callie after we last spoke, and I said, she is the only person that I've ever heard define that term correctly, other than the great Jordan Maxwell, who I learned it from many years ago, who got me into terms and phrases and emblems and the things that are really controlling this world. So you are one of the only people I've ever heard define that term properly. And that is exactly what people are doing. They're not comprehending anything anymore. They're understanding or being under the stoop of another person who is also under the stoop of another person, and on down the line.
Yeah, I can't say that I'm the kind of authority on language that Jordan Maxwell is, but anyone can see that understand is a compound word that means to stand under. And so inner standing is a whole different kind of sense of navigation in the world. You go by your inner intuition in a way, you start following your own leads, and those leads come to you. They just appear, and nobody knows who creates them. Some people say it's from God. Other people say, no, it's my higher self. It's my intuition. But that's the road you want to be on. You want to be on that road because that road is the real road of your life. And you're going to start having all kinds of adventures, and things are going to improve. Seriously, if you know what you and I know, and you look at the world around you, you don't really want to do much. What's there to plan for? And it becomes very paralyzing. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely agree. Except study more and try to get to the real path of enlightenment, which you just described. But people aren't going to have that drive or the inner view or the look inward, actually, instead of externally looking for help or a savior. How do they get that without people around them or surrounding them that are showing them that. And then for them to even take it in, it all goes back to nutrition or what they're fueling themselves with. And what I see people putting in their bodies is absolutely horrifying to me. People are eating things that say artificial. How could you put something in your mouth that says artificial? I just cannot explain that to myself.
That's a very good point, really. I hadn't even thought of it that way. But, people think that labs just create the analog artificially of what's natural. That's what I used to think, that artificial, synthetic, whatever they are, colorings are just chemicals that completely imitate, almost like a mirror, the naturally sourced material. And I didn't realize that, no, that's not the case. That what you're saying is more like it. If it's artificial, it is artificial. It does not occur in nature. And we're not really supposed to be introducing man-made agents into our bodies, and we do that all the time. And people drink. It's horrible. I go to the pool or the beach, and I see little kids with their families, and they're drinking from these bulging bottles and things, stuff that's bright blue and pink, and what is it, right?
The people putting it together do not even know. I used to call on some of the formulators of some of these supplement products, Sophia, and I would find they would tell me that how would you get the formulation for this product? Did you use some old books or did you use some old, no, I did Google searches. That was their answer, and that was some of the supposed top supplement companies around today. And their formulators said that they use Google to formulate their products, if that's not scary.
Well, I guess they're assuming that the science is posted, and so they think they're using science, but where they're getting it from is a search engine.
Right. A search engine that's owned, and we know who it's owned by. Kelly, you want to...
Sophia, what is your diet like today? I thought I heard you say before vegan, vegetarian. Is that correct?
What I eat?
Yeah, your diet, has it changed and gotten better over the years, or what's kind of...
Well, I am actually vegan. I would not try to tell people what they should eat. I happen to do best on vegan. I was vegetarian for a long time, but then I became vegan and I liked it even better. But it fits me. It fits my body. There are people who swear that they just expire and they feel really weak if they don't eat meat. And I can't sit here and argue with people. I say you have to eat what feels right to you. You have to educate yourself a little bit about what you're eating at the same time, or maybe educate yourself a lot about what you're eating.
When you say you turned to vegan, it made you feel better. Could you elaborate on the better part? How more energy, or how would you describe that?
Well, I used to like cheese. I really did. I loved, cheese on whole wheat crackers and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I decided I wasn't going to eat it every day, or I was going to eat it once a week. And I have to tell you that once I started to really cut down on cheese, I could not believe how sick it made me feel when I did eat it. It just made me feel horrible. And I realized this isn't good for me. I mean, if on every day that I don't eat this stuff, I feel really good, and then I eat the stuff, cheese, and I don't feel good, well, my body's telling me something. That's pretty black and white. Sure. So that was one thing. And then my vision actually improved. I went to the optometrist to get new glasses for distance. And he said, well, your prescription has changed. Did you? And I said, okay. And he said, it often changes. That's why we have to check you every, whatever it is, 3 to 5 years. But he said, yours has actually improved. And I said, well, good. And he said, have you made a dietary change?
Wow.
And I said, really? Have I? Yes. I went from vegetarian to vegan. So there was another little tip that it was good for me.
And that
but
was
those would be anecdotes. I mean, the latter could be an anecdotal thing.
That was an ophthalmologist, or you said that asked you that question?
No, optometrist.
Optometrist, yeah. So that's a good question. That's great. Asking relating to diet, because most the doctors that I hear from, they don't seem to equate diet and anything really, much less eyesight.
Right. Well, ophthalmologist is an MD. An optometrist has, I think it's called, I don't know if it's a DO. That's what I think it is. But this guy happens to be bright, so, and well informed, and anyway, so I'm happy with what I eat. I also don't eat a lot of food. I certainly don't eat all day long. I don't believe in constant snacking. They were trying to tell us you should eat small amounts 5 or 6 times a day, and I don't think that's good. I think your body has to put a lot of energy into digestion, and when you're digesting, it takes blood away from your brain, and I think you should digest. You can be in parasympathetic mode, not sympathetic mode. So your autonomic nervous system, ANS, has 2 branches, parasympathetic and sympathetic. Sympathetic is alert, fight, flight. You're very, sharp, and you're responding, and you're active. And parasympathetic mode is rest, digest, and sleep. And I think to digest optimally, you want to be in parasympathetic mode. You don't want to be having a big lunch and then jumping in your car and driving through traffic to a meeting and then having to be at your sharpest to negotiate in a meeting. You want to be relaxed when you digest.
Sure. And we can't be in both modes at the same time, it doesn't seem either. Is that correct?
I don't think so. What's happening today is we are in sympathetic mode way more than we should be. When you go to sleep at night, the reason your body says, lie down, don't move for the next 7 or 8 hours, I'm doing repairs. Your body doesn't want you running around, doesn't want you alert. It wants you to lie very still and not move because it's doing really deep cellular restoration. And when you sleep with your cell phone as your alarm clock next to your bed, or your router, or your cordless phone, some people sleep with a computer on all night, Wi-Fi, blaring. They go to sleep listening to podcasts or music from their computer. Well, what's happening is your body is being jostled. Your cells are getting a hammering from these oscillations. These are very high frequency radio waves, microwaves. And they are literally, one person called them body-shattering harmonics. They're breaking your cell membranes, they're flooding calcium ions into the cell, and creating chaos. And so you can never go into parasympathetic mode. And insomnia is an epidemic now. And it's because a lot of people sleep with gadgets on that are really invasive and intrusive on their own biorhythms.
Well, they sure are. We have clients that come to us and they want to know what some of the first things they can do, and they think it's all about food, but it's really about not what you're putting. It is about what you're putting in, but you have to eliminate the toxicity coming in and around the cell, even around your area, even around certain people. I mean, it just gets more broad and more broad. But the Wi-Fi is so pernicious, and I know it is. I've been instructing my clients and advising them to turn off Wi-Fi at night for, I don't know, since Wi-Fi has been invented, because it's not natural to the body. None of that is natural to the body,
So do you have Wi-Fi at home? Are you on Wi-Fi now, recording me?
We're cabled, and then when we do have to have Wi-Fi around, we definitely turn it into the airplane mode or turn computers off. We know the importance of it, that is for sure.
Yeah, and one of the things people have to do, even if they go wired, cable, Ethernet, they have to go into the settings on their computer and turn off the search function for Wi-Fi. Because all these phones and computers now, they default to looking for Wi-Fi because everybody is using it.
So even like the Bluetooth setting, correct? You would need to turn that off.
Right.
Yeah, that's exactly what we do. It's hard to impart that type of knowledge to people. They don't want to believe it again. So, can you talk about the Wi-Fi and just how bad it is for us as well, since you've touched on the cellular technology?
Well, sure. So the Earth is hit by lightning about 200 times a second, all over. And it's theorized that that's the source of the electron flow through the surface of the Earth. Electrical energy from lightning. And the surface of the earth is conductive. It is comprised of a lot of minerals, rocks, water, all of which conduct. So there's a very mild flow of electrons through the surface of the earth, which has been here forever, and it's become a life stimulus. And the Earth's electromagnetic field, so people have to understand, electromagnetic is a catch-all term. Where electricity is supplied, there's an electric field. Where power is actually drawn, there's a magnetic field. But because lightning is hitting, it's active, there is an electromagnetic field around the Earth that's actually a very low oscillation, very natural low frequencies, from 0 to 40 waves, oscillations per second. And that's what we live in. We don't even see 40 hertz on the Earth. 30 to 40 in certain equatorial thunderstorms with lightning going nuts, right? Mm-hmm. So most of the time, the Earth is at 7 to 12 hertz, and that's what your body is used to. That's what plants are used to, animals, all the crystalline tissues, the structured water in your cells. You have a crystalline water in the cytoplasm of your cell. You have crystalline proteins in your DNA. You've got crystals in your bones. So they like 7 to 12 hertz. Now a cell phone, the old cell phones were 850 megahertz, million hertz. And now the cell phones are billion hertz, 1.2 gigahertz. Wi-Fi is 2.4 gigahertz, billion hertz. So compare 1 billion or a couple billion cycles per second to 7. That's what your body likes, 7 cycles per second, not a billion. So when you're being hit by billions and billions of cycles all the time, oscillating like this, your body starts crashing, and that's what's happening.
And what are some of the effects people would feel? Would you say that people would sleep with Wi-Fi on, or next to their computer, the television's on, or what would they feel besides lethargy and a few other things? What would you say they would feel?
Not good, Kyle. Mm-hmm. I mean, I know that I don't like being around radio frequencies. I start getting a headache. I kept my life pretty clean of them. But if I have to be around them, like at a restaurant, if I'm near someone with a cell phone, I can tell my body doesn't like it, and I have to get away eventually. I have to go home and recover. And it takes about a day to get back to the feeling good that I had. So I can only say that people don't feel good now. I don't even know how they cope. I don't know how they can jolt themselves the way they do. I think they're barely hanging on by their fingernails, and they're developing. They're on the road to cancer. Cancer has exploded so hugely in our society. When I was a little girl, I was reading in my mother's magazines that 1 out of 4 people got cancer. And of course you think, you're 10 or 11 years old, oh my God, am I going to be one of those 4? But now it's 2 out of 4, and in the case of males, it's 3 out of 4. I've already had many people I know die of cancer.
You say that last part again?
There are already many people that I personally know who died from cancer.
Sure. Wow. Incredible.
And you said many people must feel awful, but the worst part is they actually think they feel fine. They say, well, I'm fine. These cell phone, the Wi-Fi, it's obviously not doing anything to me, which is worse because it's when they can't feel it that it's worse, seems like.
Right. Again, it's like, how can these people eat that artificial stuff and feel okay? And the only way they're ever going to know is if they put themselves on a different diet. And there are a lot of people who I know who've converted to more fruits and vegetables, even some people who become vegetarian or vegan. And as soon as they do that, they say, oh my God, why was I eating this other food for so many years?
Mm-hmm.
And probably realize how awful they truly felt when they said they felt just fine.
I know, that's the thing. It's a matter of degree, It's like asking somebody, "Are you happy?" "Oh yeah, I'm happy." But what degree of happiness do you have? And we cannot say, "No, you're not happy. No, you don't feel fine," because everybody is, in charge of their own emotions and body.
Well, in a way they are. In a way they're not. If they're being pretty much inundated from television and then all the frequencies we're being lambasted with. And they don't know it. So, but the people we want to impart this type of knowledge to, they don't seem to want to take it in, like we keep going back to. Even some of my best friends in the world I've known for 25 years, they will still not protect themselves from the radiation in simple ways that we've tried to discuss. Now they're slowly coming around to it, maybe 10 years later. And one thing I notice about people that are around this type of energy all day long and cell phones up to their ears all day long is that they seem to be very sped up, but they don't seem to be saying very much, or they seem to be repeating the same type of things over and over again. I don't know if that's something that's wearing on them or...
You know what I've discovered, Kyle? I think you're right. I'm listening to what you're saying. I think we were created to be creatures of intention and creation ourselves. That's how we naturally are. But we have been conditioned into creatures of response and reaction. And there are so many stimuli now in our daily lives that's what people are occupied with, responding and reacting, responding and reacting. And now with their stupid phones, they are responding and reacting all day long to texts, emails, Facebook, responding and reacting. And it's a whole different way of being. I don't see people pondering and contemplating. I go for a lot of walks, and I love taking long walks, especially by the ocean, because that's where I can think, and I think up. I analyze stuff that I've read in my head, and I think about things, and I come up with ideas, and I have to remove myself to do this. I have to remove myself from people, and I certainly don't handle gadgets while I'm doing it. And that's the creative part of me working, right? But if I had a phone in my hand and I was constantly checking Facebook and doing texts, I wouldn't be in that mode at all.
Well, you'd be downloaded. You're being downloaded when you're doing that, or reacting like you're saying, as opposed to acting in a way.
Right. So we have to put ourselves in a space where we can be a little more free-flowing and we can let stuff bubble up from... remember they used to talk about the subconscious so much, and they don't talk about subconscious drives anymore because everybody is in this hyper-conscious mode, because that's what we have been forced to, that's the gear we've been forced to get into because we have so much stimulus around us.
But they're not really conscious, though. They're not conscious of the real things. They're conscious of everything that people are pushing on them. Correct?
Right. It's not the subconscious at work. Mm-hmm. It's not the deep self. The deep self doesn't have a chance to come out. I'm kind of mixing terms here, but I think you understand what I'm talking about. And it is disappointing. I've tried to tell several mainstream, let's call them friends and neighbors, that they should get an analog meter and they would sleep a lot better, and they should not, use Wi-Fi, should convert to Ethernet. And all I get is, oh, my husband would never let me do that. He would just never let me.
Yeah, we just went through that with our last client, or one of our clients, who's very tech savvy, and I guess it would be savvy, but definitely tech heavy in the home, But it's so detrimental to the entire family that we can't keep from at least sharing the information that we have with them. And not in our information, just the experts that we've studied, for the last 10, 15 years. True scientists, Susan Clark is one of them. I believe she's extremely well informed. I believe you know her as well.
I do know of her. I have not communicated with her directly, but I know of her, and yeah, she knows a lot. So Kyle, you and Callie work together in counseling people in nutrition and health?
Yes, ma'am, we do.
Can you tell me a little about it?
this is something that I've done my entire life. I've always tried to surround myself with people that were healthy, and I look to them, almost as my mentors. The people that I wanted to be around were people that were healthy, and I wanted to know exactly what they were doing to be healthy. And that started probably when I was 17, 18 years old. I have very good friends that were the Labrada family. I'm not sure if you're familiar with them, but they were a big influence in my life. A family that came here from Cuba. So I just saw everyone in that family was very big and strong, and I knew that I wanted to be like that, and I wanted to learn everything I could about nutrition. And as I went further along, I just started to begin to realize that everything reverts back to nutrition and what you fuel your body with. I will say in my early 20s or even before that, hippies, I use that term loosely, but just some people that were into that type of movement, they started to show me symbols and emblems and started to make me look at the back of shampoo bottles. And I started to look into these things, and I couldn't believe that was the people that were making and this was when I was 18, so it must have been in 83 or something, so I started to realize how important what we put on our body was, what we put in our body was. And then so that's what I've always been into. So always been around physical training and training other athletes, and the basis has always been into nutrition and the highest degrees of it. And not even food so much. It's just I realize that we're fueled by electricity, and everything goes back to electricity. So I was writing about the light body I believe when I was 23 in college, and people thought that I was crazy just from reading philosophers and the way they put it back to the light, So that's what we try to do now is we try to share with as many people as possible the powers of nutrition and how the body is it's a miraculous machine. It really is. And it has the ability to heal immediately when you start fueling it with the right ingredients. So that's what we do.
It's wonderful. It makes me think of what I learned a few years ago when I started carrying a sunscreen line made by a biochemist who also makes the magnesium cream that I sell, which is absolutely miraculous. We're very deficient in magnesium. The body loves it, and you can take muscular pain away so fast just by putting a dab of this magnesium cream on. But anyway, just wanted to mention that I learned that I had heard this, but of course, you hear it takes a couple of different times of hearing something to really ingest it. I had heard that your skin is your biggest mouth. It's your largest organ, and it is a mouth, just like your mouth. And so what you put on your skin, you should be willing to put in your mouth. Absolutely. And thus, I learned from this biochemist, conventional sunscreen. For one thing, rating sunscreens at 35, 40, 50 SPF, 70 SPF, this is all bunk because there's nothing higher than 30 that tests in the lab. You can't get a reading higher than around 31, 32, 33 protection factor. So 50 is just marketing when they write that on there, or 70 doesn't mean it's better or more effective. Secondly, the stuff in sunscreen is petrochemicals. You're using nanoparticles that evade your skin. They get into you. The figures of the immune system can't even find nanomaterials because they're so small. They're less than a micron. So you want to use sunscreens with very simple ingredients like non-nano zinc. Certainly you don't want to use titanium. But what he said was, this blew me away. This guy who makes the sunscreen line I carry. Using 1 ounce of commercial sunscreen on your skin wipes away an entire year of eating organic.
Wow.
Wow. I have heard you say that before. How incredible. 1 ounce of sunscreen, of chemical.
And that's what they tell you. I was, just in a dermatologist's office, and I saw a big sign, you have to use 1 ounce out of the bottle every single time you go outside.
Wow. Just to be clear, I would never use sunscreen. What I've found is people that are full of life and minerals and carbon, like we talked about, we don't need sun. I've never needed sunscreen. I can be out in the sun all day long and not even get burned. I mean, maybe a little bit red, but now I'm not advising that. Obviously, most people are horribly under nutrified and will burn. But you know, if you get the sun at the right times, it's it's the healing force and the cause of all life on the planet. How can it be bad for us?
Well, it really has to do with how much melanin is in your skin, and very fair people do not have a lot of melanin. Melanin actually converts. It's a pigment, it's a biopolymer in your skin. The presence of melanin in your skin makes your skin stronger and thicker and sturdier, which is why dark-skinned people have thicker skin because they have more melanin, and light-skinned people have very little melanin and they have much more papery skin. But if you have melanin in your skin, it is able to convert ultraviolet energy from the sun into heat, thermal energy. And melanin by itself is a sunscreen. So you, Kyle, may have more melanin than others, and therefore you don't need a physical sunscreen. But what happened was we had a lot of population migration going on the Earth, and therefore people who had been born and whose antecedents lived in areas where there was less fierce sun, they could make their vitamin D very quickly. Really, you need sun for electrons. There's a photonic electron effect that comes from sunlight. You need sunlight to come through your skin and eyes to kick up your production of vitamin D, which in turn generates all kinds of biological transactions in your body. But very light-skinned people, 15 minutes in the sun, they can make their vitamin D for the day. But a darker-skinned person would need an hour in the sun, or 2 or 3 hours. So what's happening is there are light-skinned people living in places like San Diego, where they're full vitamin D producing sun and fierce sun in summer. And it's vital to use sunscreen on certain parts of your body if your skin just can't handle that much sun exposure. So I use sunscreen on the tips of my ears, on the bridge of my nose, sometimes on my knees, if I'm going to be out in the sun, sometimes on my shoulders. And I use this sunscreen that has only 4 ingredients in it. It's called Body Block. I sell it on my website. Actually, I named it. I was the person who came up with the name. And it is simply zinc oxide, coconut oil, beeswax, and a little vanilla extract. It's white, it blends into your skin very nicely, and there's a darker version, a tint, that has cocoa powder in it, and it's all organic. You could put it in your mouth, and some people use it on their lips.
Yeah, I would definitely use that. And I was going to refer to the islanders who use nothing but coconut oil for sunscreen. So a little different how Americans perceive, or most Americans in the West would perceive sunscreen as being a bottle of whatever, just a bunch of chemicals, and how we perceive sunscreen as being coconut oils and vanilla extract and cocoa, you know.
Well, the barrier in the sunscreen is the zinc oxide, and it actually puts a layer of a matte material, which doesn't allow the rays of the sun to get through into your skin. But you really don't want to coat your body. I remember once putting commercial sunscreen on many years ago because I figured I heard so much about, oh, you have to use sunscreen. So I thought, all right, I'll get some and I'll use it. And I went for a run, and I was exhausted, Kyle, because I couldn't sweat. I could feel that I wasn't sweating properly because this stuff was sticking to me. It was like saran wrap. And I never used it again.
Yeah, that is exactly right. And you got to be able to sweat, right? Open up the channels of elimination for sure.
Sure, I mean, your body wants to do its natural processes.
And you mentioned melanin. Does not carbon create the melanin though?
Carbon?
Doesn't forms of carbon create the melanin? Organic materials create the melanin in the body?
I'm not sure what exactly how melanin is made, if that's what you're asking. It is a biopolymer though, and it is a natural sunscreen, and it's a pigmentation color. It's a pigmentation agent cell, but it's also a structural cell.
Mm-hmm. I think it's all going back to the soil. I really do. I believe that's the carbon is what gives vegetables their color, you know.
It's like this, y'all. This is 10% luck, 20% skill, 15% concentrated power of will, 5% pleasure, 50% pain, and 100% reason to remember the name. He doesn't need his name up in lights, he just wants to be heard, whether it's the beat of the mic. He feels so unlike everybody else, alone, in spite of the fact that some people still think that they know him, but fuck him, he knows the code. It's not about the salary, it's all about reality and making some noise, making a story, making sure his click stays up. That means when he puts it down, Todd's picking it up. Let's go.
Who the hell is he anyway? He never really talks much, never concerned with status, but still leaving him starstruck. Humble through opportunity.